Hello, and welcome back to AI Ramblings, episode 26. Neil McQuana over there, the handsome lad in black, and me, I guess, in black still. It's so good, Neil, to be doing another one of these a little bit later
Yeah.
in the week. I was at an investor conference that ate up the week a little bit, and we'll talk about that toward the end of the show. But a lot happened again, and we want to talk about a number of things on the show. But let me just frame the news items of the week. Number one, OpenAI. Oh my God, I've watched amazing companies and startups for 35 years. At Goldman Sachs, we took Microsoft public in '86, Dell in '88, Yahoo in '95, eBay in '98. I have never seen a startup execute this fast, like almost weekly cadences up and down the tech stack from infrastructure all the way to applications at the pace that they were doing it. And this is a company that, I guess I am praising them a little bit, but they've gone from 500 employees to 3,000 employees just in the space of the last year or so. And they're digesting all these people and they're executing at this rate. And they had a bunch of announcements this week. One of them is their long-awaited AI browser, which is going to be our main topic of this show, episode 26. But they also announced a couple of acquisitions that are very interesting, and so a lot going on. In the meantime, their competitors and peers are not, counting flowers and daisies. You saw Anthropic and Google ramp up a multi tens of billions of dollar deal using Google TPU chips and ramping up Anthropic stuff. Again, very big, multiple gigacenter data centers generally out there. Whenever you read 1 gigawatt data center, which by the way was a fictional thing about a year ago, now it's a thing. Any company that announces, and typically we're talking about OpenAI, Google, Meta, and Elon with XAI, those are the companies that are playing at these rarefied leagues. A gigawatt, whenever you hear that, it's a buzzword. $50 billion for the data center and the power, just starting point. So just so you have that in your mind. Also, to put this into perspective, this year, all the big tech companies are going to spend 300 billion plus a year. Remember when America beat the Soviet Union in the space to the race from 69 to 74, we put, I think, about a dozen-ish people on the moon, all men. That cost us on today's dollars a little less than $450 billion. So it gives you a scale at where this stuff is. And that's why all the bubble talk and so on. And again, I'll come back to it, in terms of the investor conference that I was at. So that's number one. And number two, the other thing is Meta, which was a big, all this summer, paying $150 billion, $1 million, for AI researchers, mostly from China, and poaching them from OpenAI, poaching them from Apple, particularly, etc. They're now kind of digesting it. It's like, a big python has eaten a rhinoceros and they're digesting it. So there's a lot of pruning and paring. They let go a few hundred people. And so there's the recognizable digestion phase, which is notable. And then the other news of the week, this kind of happened kind of today that, a lot of things happened, but we're just picking this because we've talked a lot about AI smart glasses on the show. Meta's obviously spending billions on it. Apple just now, flipped their aircraft, turned their aircraft carrier from the Vision Pro, even though they're going in on it, and then Samsung came in and said, oh, if you have $3,500 Vision Pros, here's our Samsung XR in partnership with Google, only $1,800. And oh, by the way, on this one, you can do YouTube and Netflix apps, which you can't get on the Vision Pro. That's why my Vision Pro sits over there. And now I'm tempted. I may have to get these Samsung XRs, $1,800. I'm an idiot. But the smart glasses for AI are the things. So it's these kinds of things look thicker. You've seen my Meta AI glasses and all of that. But Snapchat, which was one of the original OGs in AR smart glasses, but it's a teeny company. They're way out of their league on this one, given the tens of billions that already needed. So guess what? They want to raise $1 billion, and guess where they're knocking on the door? Saudi Arabia, the Public Investment Fund, saying, "Hey guys, you like all this fancy futuristic stuff over here? Evan, he's a great techie. People kid it. He's basically the chief technology officer for Meta." Because, he comes up with the cool ideas and Meta then implements them and makes tens of billions. I'm sorry, the inside industry joke, but it's going on out there. That's some of the news of the week. I'll pause there so much. I don't know where to
Yeah.
stop. We're just slapping in the ocean surf. What do you think, Neil?
Yeah, it's a lot. There's so much. I mean, I'll kind of start from the end there from what you said. I remember when the Snapchat glasses came out ages ago. You had somehow
I think that was one of my
mangled,
Christmas gifts to you.
but somehow figured out a way to get me a pair. I
They
remember
were
they were
hard to
like
get.
very they only had these like vending machines. There was no way to order them. You had to kind of get
You
it
were
was just very
young. I
like
had to
in
impress you
person.
for a
I
birthday
know.
gift, I think it was.
And
This
I
is
was very
coming up.
impressed, and I it was something I remember taking on a school trip, and it was like new and no one had seen them before, and it felt very futuristic. I had fun with it for a year, and then I don't think I really touched them.
That's
And now
fine. It's a collector's item now.
this resurgence of smart glasses, as we've talked about in the last few shows, kind of reminds me of that, and the improvements that are being made there. Yeah, we touched on it a bit. I mean, as far as Snap goes, I don't really use Snapchat as much, and talking to my friends in my circles, I think it's one of those things where you kind of graduate after a certain point in time, a certain age around where I'm at, where people maybe move off of Snapchat. It was kind of a high school, early college app to now just regular text messaging and just DMs on things like Instagram and stuff. So in terms of Snap, it's good to see them still trying to work on something that you could say they maybe helped pioneer back in the day with the smart glasses. But we'll have to kind of see where that goes. OpenAI, I mean, there's so much stuff, we didn't even cover, but they also ended up acquiring Sky, which is this like pseudo Cluely-esque without all the, scariness of Cluely potentially.
Explain Sky and Cluely. Just a little bit. We've talked about it, but
Yeah.
for the civilians out there, it's a great point.
Yeah, so Cluely, as a lot of people know, mostly through their like viral marketing, is this like AI cheating assistant where it'll gain access to your entire screen, every pixel, and it's mostly for things like interviews and stuff. If you're talking to someone and you need help responding to that, it'll have an overlay on top of your screen where it'll prompt you with areas to discuss in, or it'll essentially help you script a conversation using AI in real time, and it can be used for a variety of other things, but that's kind of what Clueless is. Sky is kind of the more sophisticated and maybe has a little bit more decorum than
And
than
Sam Altman was a personal investor in it.
than Cluely has, and it kind of came full circle because it was made by a team of people that left Apple. They made Sky, and now they've been acquired by OpenAI as of last week. And it's OpenAI's foray into kind of helping to control more of the Mac ecosystem in terms of how they access on desktop things rather than just through a browser or through an app on the computer.
I think it's worth it. I am so curious about it, particularly because of what you and I have talked about with Cluely and so on. Because the general direction, we've talked about AI browsers, and we're going to talk about it as our main topic this week, shortly here in a minute. But the core thing for Meta, for OpenAI, etc., and for Google is how we've talked about the AI operating system, which is browsers is just the starting point because that's the first app every 5 billion people use every day when they do things on the internet. But the operating system, that's where, something that stays above it and kind of monitors and does stuff. That's what Sky stuff is supposed to do. That's what Cluey is supposed to do. And basically, it's supposed to be your kind of a second set of eyes that's looking at everything. And then it's quickly looking things up and say, hey, this is what you should remember about this thing that you're looking at, or this person you're about to talk to, and so on. So this is very powerful stuff. It's all science fiction-y, but it's early days, a lot of privacy and trust issues, huge. That's why the bigger the company, the better theoretically. But even there, you gotta pay attention. I mean, Meta, which is as big as you can use as they come almost, they did a kind of a sneaky thing just a few days ago, where they said if you use our AI tools to do images and so on, which by the way, all of Google, Apple, they're all encouraging people to use AI tools to create all these images and videos and so on. So Meta said, if you use our tools, as of, I think, mid-December, we are going to, by default, access your contacts on your phones, even though you don't use Meta AI, which I think, is a bit aggressive. And again, this is where, when we talk about all these issues, and this acquisition by OpenAI is a case in point and so on, a key piece, because we've never seen any other tech wave before, where the companies who are selling you the applications are also essentially monitoring everything that you do, and then take everything that not just that you do, but you do to get to the things that you really want to get done. They take all of that data and they use it to continue to train their models and continue to post train their models, chain of thought, reasoning, all of that. And that is a thing. That is a thing. Is it, is it fair use? Is it not fair use? Should I be compensated for it? Was my privacy? If there are law cases, etc., who gets subpoenaed? My God, these are issues we've never had to deal with at this kind of scale. And that's why this is a big deal, discussing all the news of the week. But it particularly is a big deal as we get into our main topic of the week. Now that OpenAI is officially in the race, they have an AI browser. It's called Atlas, which is, Atlas shouldering huge responsibilities on his shoulders. That was my post this week on it. And, it's out. It's out on the Mac. It'll be on other devices right now, desktop, mobile devices and Android, presumably to come soon. And there are reviews emerging on Atlas against Google Chrome, which is obviously ramping up with Gemini. And then there's a couple of startups, Perplexity with Comet that we've talked about, the Dia and the Arc browsers from the browser company, which, by the way, ironically, that deal, the $610 million acquisition, closed literally on the day that OpenAI announced Atlas. So the reason I'm kind of setting it up for everybody to just remember, because you, Neil, you have at AI Ramblings, this has been a topic for us, AI browsers, from our first shows. I would venture to say about half our shows or more have been talking about AI browsers. We've talked about it, we've written about it. So this is a rich topic, and it's the beginning stages of the beginning stages. And the most important thing, ladies and gentlemen, this gentleman here, he actually uses he consumes the AI browser dog food much more than I do. So
Yeah.
Neil, take it away. You give us
Yeah,
your impressions on all this.
Yeah, this is something I think we were looking forward to for a while. One thing to note is I think very smartly OpenAI has called this thing not Atlas but ChatGPT Atlas. So there's a bit of marketing familiarity with the name of the product, and it'll be interesting to see if they end up routing people who use ChatGPT on the web or on the desktop app, and they kind of add in a pop up or an ad saying that, hey, we have our own browser, not just user acquisition thing. But all that aside, it came out. It was something I've been excited for. As you just said, we've been talking about AI browsers for a while, and it's kind of been on the top of my mind. But I think that this release and the discussion that followed kind of put a lot of things into perspective for me as to where this space is at. Specifically on Atlas, my kind of like pipeline for when it came out, when I used it was, it's out, looks interesting. I downloaded it, used it for a bit. I was like, oh, maybe this is promising. And then I maybe spent an hour or so with it, and I don't think I've touched it since. And I think there's a variety of reasons for that. Because I think it's also good to put into perspective all the different players that are in this space. You touched on it, but the browser company has Dia, which was kind of one of the first ones in this space, actually, that added using ChatGPT and a variety of other models the ability to prompt based on what web page you're on. Then Comet came in, which was the offering by Perplexity. Perplexity, of course, kind of building itself up as an AI search engine. And then Google tried a bit, adding Gemini into Chrome, and ChatGPT finally came out with Atlas. I think each of them has its own pros and cons, but one thing that really drew me away from Atlas that's different on the other AI browsers is that on Dia and on Comet, whenever you do a search, you have the ability to toggle on or off in the settings, whether or not you want that search to be an AI search, where it's almost like a natural language query where it'll just source and summarize information and give it to you, or if you want it to be a Google search. That's something that ChatGPT does not allow you to do. So any search that you do, and it's kind of a force of habit thing because we've talked about it in the past a bit, where all of us have kind of rewired our brains to SEO and typing things in very specific ways to get the results we want. Natural language is not really something that we're used to doing anymore. ChatGPT Atlas kind of expects that of you. It expects you to type in natural language SEO. There's so many times where I found myself opening a new tab and just trying to type a quick query, restaurants around me or something. It sent me down a rabbit hole of AI summaries and recommendations where all I really want to do is just get a search on Google, and it's not possible to do. And you can even see in the UI they built. I think the UI is one of the weakest parts of Atlas because it really does just. I think people throw around ChatGPT wrapper a lot. It really is just a wrapper for ChatGPT. Now, number one, it's built on Chromium, so it's Chrome based. But the key thing is even the UI, the sidebar when you pull it up on the left side, it's all your recent queries on ChatGPT. And on the right side, it's a new chat window where you can interact with the web page you're on currently. And I think it's one of those things where OpenAI maybe felt a bit of pressure that they had to get this out because there's rumors that Claude might be doing something similar soon. Obviously, Copilot's been making a lot of moves on this too, and maybe they just had to get something out fast. But you could even see in the demo that they showed that the use cases of this are still very, very limited. I don't know why. Since I saw it on Twitter, but a lot of people, for whatever reason, whenever they reveal these things, they use travel as like a use case. Whenever you're trying to book a flight or something, in terms of them showing off the agentic features, and that kind of led to a lot of discussion on that side of things as well. On agentic, is that there's been a bit of a concern with what's called prompt injection on the security side of things, where malicious websites would be able to put text in on their pages that essentially route the model to do things that you're not aware of. So send all your information to this person or access this part of your history, and that's kind of by nature one of the pitfalls of this type of a platform, because it is a platform that relies on the user wanting to give up their context, which is why I still do think, similar to how I think that Apple is still in the race for AI, I think Google with Chrome is still the biggest player in this once they get all of their stuff together. Because right now, it's the experience that they offer on Chrome with Gemini is not good at all. Once they're able to figure that out, Chrome is the context for a lot of people. A majority of people use Chromes. When they get a laptop, the first thing they download is Chrome, just because it's probably the most used browser for a lot of people that I know. And once Google is able to figure it out, I think they'll put them in pole position. But yeah, Atlas and all was a bit underwhelming, and it kind of I alluded to it when I started talking, but it kind of maybe highlighted a bit of where the space is at right now. I had a lot of high hopes for it, but I think it's one of those things where until they figure out the UI of all this, it's really not going to work, and it's not going to appeal to mainstream people. I think for people like us who like to play around with these things, it's fun, but for an everyday user, I just don't see it picking up as of now, especially when UI is very abstract, kind of compared to what we're used to right now in search. But yeah,
And you touched on some very good key points here. Number one, that so I want to make sure people don't glaze over this business of we've got majority of people on the planet trained on Google search, 10 trillion searches a day. The world works with SEO, which is search engine optimization, which means the shorter stuff you put in, the system's smart enough to find great results for you very fast. If you watch the OpenAI Atlas demo, when they were doing the searches, I was like, I need to go get a cup of coffee while the thing was searching. It was, they haven't optimized, it needs to be under 100 milliseconds, and they know that, but because they don't have the search engine piece, they've got to do it that way. So that SEO versus AI search is a very key piece. It also kind of highlights in hindsight why Google has been doing AI the way they've been doing, which is, they've been rolling it out as their compute ramps up, etc. But when you do any search on Google, it gives you multiple layers. It gives you now the AI mode, which is literally the probabilistic stuff. And then if you want to go deeper, it goes into Gemini deep dive. And then underneath is this other results that we are trained to get. That's there, and they're fast, and you can go get them. And if it's monetizable, they'll put ads against it, sponsored by, which is the blue links stuff that that's how they get paid for doing all the stuff for us. So a company that's going to play in this stake needs all of that. The browsers is just a mechanism to get to it. That means Perplexity, which has been doing it. And I bring it up Perplexity because you offline told me that of all the AI browsers, there's one browser that is your daily go-to. So tell us about that, because it's interesting.
yeah. So I guess before I answer, I can kind of give a timeline of where I've been at with browsers for the last couple of months. As I said, I've been using Chrome. I was never really a Safari person. I've always used Chrome. I found out about Arc, which is my introduction to the browser company. Started using Arc a lot, and I really do think Arc is still the best browser out there from a usability point of view. Then the browser company put out Dia, which was my introduction to this space, and Perplexity released Comet. I think everything is good for a different reason. I think Dia is really, really good on the design side of things. They have a lot of really cool UI features that I don't think are being done very well, especially with what they've done with skills, which is essentially this ability to create a recipe of a prompt. And they made a couple advances in that they announced this past week, where in very simple text, you're able to, there's a lot of buzz about prompt engineering when AI blew up. And this is essentially like the next layer on top of prompt engineering, where someone can say it's essentially a prompt to build a prompt. So you can say that I want a prompt that'll help me refine the tweet that I'm currently typing up. And the model will take that, what you just wrote, and generate a full in-depth prompt that will leverage this model that you're using to the maximum of its capabilities. So small stuff like that, I think Dia is doing a really good job of focusing on. But the reason I really switched to Comet and why I still use it as like my daily driver, for lack of better words, is the AI capabilities on there are still the most refined. I think Perplexity as a product is very good in terms of how they handle search. And I think it's a good mix of decent UI and still a lot of the powerful tech that's behind these models. So I've been using Comet and I reverted back to it. I was really excited about Atlas and thought this might be my ability to switch. And I even put it on my dock on my computer and I instantly removed it because it didn't live up to what I'd hoped.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be continuing to focus on AI browsers, so you don't have to do as much. It's cool. It's not yet mainstream. It's for the geeks, and it'll get better. We love this stuff, and we take the risks. This prompt engineering, which is a buzzword that Neil's talking about, it's scary stuff. OpenAI had to actually respond very quickly, their engineers. And basically, it's a long document. You can read it. The summary was, we know about it. We're working on it. Be careful. But it's so scary because bad guys, can put, and I saw this in the 90s. You were not there at that time. You didn't show up until this century showed up. But there was the same thing, people could put stuff on web pages way back then that only the computers could read. And they, basically did nasty things that regular humans couldn't tell. And this is now that times 100 with AI. And that's what prompt engineering really is. And when your AI browsers are doing agentic things, which is a thing we did not talk a lot about, because all these AI browsers, you mentioned Skills by one of the companies, these are fancy ways to do agentic, where it's going out and doing things for you. And you pointed out, most of the examples these companies are focused on is go buy travel tickets and shop for you. Why? Because that's where the money is. They get a commission. OpenAI just announced a big gazillion-dollar deal with Walmart, integrating Walmart shopping into ChatGPT. Well, guess what? If you use Atlas the browser, you'll obviously get, more capabilities, and, there'll be money changing hands and so on and so forth. So all of this, the technology is evolving, the money is evolving in terms of the flows redone. So very exciting, crazy stuff. But that's our main topic of the week for that reason. We've been waiting for it. And the last thing I'll say here is now most of the major players have now officially come into the race. But there is one big missing party, Apple. Apple with the Safari browser, desktop, and on the mobile side, characteristically, they haven't said peep on AI browsers. And I kind of like it. Apple, Tim, that's okay. Why? It's not quite ready for mainstream. Apple, when you do it, we expect it. It's going to be trustworthy. It's going to be privacy. You're not going to try and move fast and break things. You're not going to allow bad guys to take advantage of real users, mainstream users. And that's the whole Megillah. Fine for OpenAI, fine for Comet, Google, fine. But, they're careful. But that is the big one. Technology is awesome. We tech geeks love technology for technology's sake. But most technology magic tricks are magic tricks. It's looking for a solution when oftentimes you don't need a solution with the technology that we have. Enough lecture. I'll get off my high horse on this issue, but that's why this AI browser, we're excited. Net, we're excited. We think this is going to be very cool stuff over a few years. It will utterly change how we think about the internet. All good stuff, but it's a bumpy road from here to there. And that's what we wanted to underline. So that takes us to the end of that topic, Neil. And I think we now have to go to our reads of the week. And you had a couple of good ones, and I have something, and let's go to that.
Yeah, so for my read of the week, it was an interesting document that I was seeing on Twitter and on LinkedIn a lot. I'm not exactly sure how it got out, or if it was intended to get out, or what the situation is, but Perplexity essentially had an internal document that they made called Perplexity for Work, which explains to people how to leverage Perplexity to get work tasks done the best possible. So it talks about automation on the agentic side of things, which we touched on, but also things like prompt engineering. But it was interesting, and it was a good read of the week for me because I use the product. I use perplexity, but B, because it's great to see them talk about how they think it needs to be used and how they found the most use cases for it internally. So the document's been shared all around, and a lot of people have seen it. As I said, it went viral a bit on social media this week. But it gives a lot of insight into how you can modify your work and really leverage AI, because I think right now, there's talk of a bubble and all that. I think people are just trying to apply AI wherever and however. But I think this document does a really good job of distilling the real value when it comes to leveraging this stuff for work.
Cool.
I encourage everyone who's kind of interested in applying it in that way to check it out, and it definitely helped me out as I was kind of thinking through this side of things.
Awesome. Worth flagging, and I'm looking forward to going through it in detail. There's a lot in there. My read of the week is, every few months we take a temperature of where people's attitudes are on AI, etc. This time, I've written about it a lot. People have been more negative about AI than other things because we've been conditioned with science fiction that AI is bad and so on. And so all of these companies have a lot of headwind to convince people that this stuff is good. In the meantime, as we just talked about with AI browsers, that a lot of bad stuff that can happen too. So there's a cross current. But the latest survey came out. That's my read of the week. I wrote about it, etc. So there'll be links in the show notes. But people are still cautious about AI in terms of how they talk to the people who are doing the surveys. Yet, actually, when they do their behaviors, this is the place where we've talked about is humans still think that AI is going to be better than them, and they think they're companions and they're their assistants. And the big companies are not doing anyone favors, basically, brainwashing them that, hey, this is your second, your doppelganger, your twin, and they're going to help you. Don't do that. This is just a bloody helper piece of software. Okay, if there's one thing I want to focus on, and I've been saying this for a very long time, 80 plus days now on Reset to Zero, please don't humanize the AI. This is not a living thing. Won't be for a decade or more. Don't anthropomorphize AI. And every company today is trying to get you to do that. Microsoft just revived their Clippy assistant, and they're calling it Miko. Get it, MICO, Microsoft Co. We get it, Microsoft, and it's a little emoji thing that talks to you and kind of suggests things. So please, so this is my thing on the read of the week is that you need to be cautious, eyes wide open, and people have those attitudes, but they're thinking about these things as companions and so on. So balance that, everybody. There's an old expression: friends don't let friends drive drunk, right? My new version of that phase is: friends don't let friends anthropomorphize AIs, humanize AIs. Okay, maybe we'll get a bumper sticker going to that effect. Okay. All right. So that's our read of the week. So that takes us to our obsession of the week. Neil, what have you been obsessed about?
My obsession of the week, it kind of went under the radar. It was an ad that Apple put out in kind of in relationship to their new M5 chips on the Mac. But it was special because it was, of course, narrated by Jane Goodall, who, of course, recently passed away. But the focus of the ad was very interesting. It felt to me, at least, I'd love to get your opinion on it because we haven't really talked about it outside of the show. When you watch it, it almost feels like it's Apple saying, hey, we're not going all in on this AI thing right now. We're still putting humans at the center of this. We still want people to be the ones who come up with these ideas, because it's all focused around essentially this idea behind the ad is that the cursor, this blinking thing on your screen, is kind of where some of the most important things in our lives have come from. People coming up with these new ideas and just typing them out and building them out, and hopefully on Macs, as of course Apple would like to be the case. But it was an ad about creativity and building things, but it had a not strange, but it had a subliminal emphasis on the humanity of it rather than, I think, the AI of it all.
Missed it. I thank you for putting it up there. It's 1 minute. People watch it. It'll tug your heartstrings, especially because it's Jane Goodall. Now, if you don't know about her, we'll put show notes. She was an amazing human being. Netflix just did a documentary on her, which I haven't watched yet, but the Vanity Fair had a great review. We'll put up that review on the show notes as well. But it totally blew me away. Especially because Jane Goodall and who she represented spent her life basically looking at the connectivity of communication with other creatures that we evolved from, apes and so on. So it's ironic because AI, other creatures that are supposed to be ahead of us and they today have intelligence far lower than the apes. So there is a whole thing. Someone far smarter than me should write an essay on this in the Atlantic or something. It's just a deep, crazy topic. But yes, the thing that totally blew me away with the ad was that not one point in the ad does it say, and here's the AI, the Clippy or the Miko or the assistant or the browser that's going to help you do this stuff. And yes, it will over time, but at the moment, just enjoy this. It also reminded me of Steve Jobs, the computer, and when he was your age, he talked about, he has this wonderful clip. We'll put it up in the show notes too. But he said the computer, when it came, it wasn't going to replace humans. It was going to make us, it was going to be the bicycle of our mind. It is going to make us faster with like a bicycle makes us the fastest creature on planet Earth, faster than the fastest cheetah. A bicycle, a computer basically helps us go farther. And that's what AI is today. And I've written essays about this, that AI is going to be our motorcycle. But that's what it's a tool. It's not human. It's not a friend. It's not a companion, especially for our young people who are going to be exposed to this and our loved older ones. If my parents were still alive, I would give them the AI, but I would tell them it's not human. I would tell mom that especially because she loved that stuff. And that's a personal thing. But I'm just this is very important. That's why I love your obsession of the week ad. Thank you for putting that up there. My obsession of the week is really I was at an investor conference. My friend Howard Linson does an annual conference in Coronado in San Diego, where this year there were 400 people, investors, public, private, technology, short-term, long-term, etc. And I got to present on AI stuff there on a couple of events to investors. And the obsession was, and I love those things because I get to get a real-time temperature of what's in the real minds of the investors, whether they're trading day to day or investing for the long term, etc. And as you'd expect, the questions are, is there an AI bubble? Is there, are these sums crazy? How does this compare to other tech cycles? So I won't belabor all that. I answer those questions. For you guys, I've answered that daily on our show. I'll put up a couple of posts on this topic recently. But I would say my takeaway from that session of the week, just talking to these people, is that people are leaning into this stuff, as we all know, more than they're afraid of it. But they want to do it cautiously. So I got some pleasure out of that, and people asked some very good questions. I'll be thinking a lot about some of this, writing about it, etc. So I will share this ongoing obsession of mine with AI and how it's going to change humanity, politics, but mostly the social engineering that is happening actively and passively of our ways to do things. And so it was a good week. And so thank you, Howard, for the opportunity to mingle with everybody out there. And so that was my obsession of the week. So that brings us, Neil, to our burning questions for each other. And my burning question, since we talked about the AI browsers a lot and how you're using it, and we talked about how the geeks are reviewing it and so on, let's talk about it. Mainstream, or everything, etc. And maybe it's not there today, but we use your mom and my sister as the proxy for mainstream users. When do you think she might actually get something useful out of an AI browser? What could it be?
Yeah.
And when?
Yeah, I think in terms of her, just focusing on her and people similar to her. I remember couple of years ago, there was a big trend on YouTube. A lot of people would have their videos sponsored by this company called Honey, which was essentially an extension that would help you find coupon codes and stuff when you're shopping. And that is one area that I could see these AI browsers excelling in. Is if you're at a checkout page, it'll do it for you. It'll go and look for all the coupon codes, all the discounts that you could possibly find, and it'll try all the codes so you don't have to copy and paste things from a website into the code box. It'll do it for you, and it'll get you the maximum amount of savings. It's actually something that I did try out recently. I was shopping for something, and I did it, and it actually did a decent job. I got I think 20% off or something on a thing I was buying. And that type of stuff is where I can really see value being added, because stuff like summarization and comparing tabs, I don't think the everyday user cares about that. They care about what matters to them most, which is stuff like this.
Neil, you knocked it out of the park. And that is something today. And by the way, I think it's Comet that's actually the best one so far in this race. They not only find the promo codes, but they test them and they apply it in your cart. And that's something your mom, my sister, can use tomorrow. So that
Yeah,
is a cool thing. So that would be one reason for her to try an AI browser that is mainstream. My God,
definitely.
that is the one. Everything else, let's just forget of it. It's for the geeks. This is for the real people. I love it. That was a
Exactly.
great burning question. Okay, Neil, take us out with your burning question for me.
Yeah, so mine was once again AI browser focus. It's regarding a lot of the agentic capabilities of these things. Do you see yourself? We've discussed privacy and user safety a lot in the past. Do you see yourself ever, in the near future, asking your browser to do a task and walking away to get a cup of coffee, as a lot of people have been saying, and just hoping when you get back everything's the way it should be, and maybe your data hasn't been siphoned off by a malicious intent?
Your uncle has been heads over heels on AI agents before AI agents, which was cool. Your uncle took a company called General Magic public in 1995, decades before AI agents were ready. The founders of they were all ex-Apple guys. Some of the most brilliant minds in the country, headed by a friend who's a fellow who's now a longtime friend, Mark Borat. AI agents are been around, and now today, AI agents are finally, ready to do their thing in a big way. But it's still early, and much of the show has been about how the technologies are early. They conflict in many ways with the profit motives of the companies who are pushing all this, and how they're snarfing our data and so on. So, and the agents themselves, I think, will take a lot longer to be truly useful the way they're being promised. So, I continue to be in the bucket that the stuff will still take a lot longer. And and for mainstream people, this is interesting to watch, but don't beware. So personally, the way I look at AI agents and in terms of these browsers, and I try them all, etc., I do it, and I used this metaphor earlier. One genre of movies that I love are war movies, and one of the typical scenes you see in most war movies is the platoon walking around a field, and then someone blows up and they lose their foot or their life, and then everyone flips, and then they realize they're in a minefield, and they try and find their path through it. That's where we are with agents, AI agents. We're in a minefield. Be very careful. Every agent, every browser, anything you try it in a small way, small steps, and then figure out if it's safe and you found the clear path to the minefield, then use that agent, especially for things that really matter, like financial transactions and buying things and selling anything that's consequential. So be careful with AI agents, and I don't think we're at a safe place. This is why I want to wait for Apple to show some of the path, and when we're not going to see it this year, I think, in any big way. We're going to start to see it next year. But in the meantime, the big companies are experimenting, and for the early adopters, and that's who we are, approach it, but carefully, like in a minefield. So
Definitely.
that's our show for this week, episode 26. Again, as usual, we thank you for joining us for this half hour or so. As usual, any thoughts, comments, please feel free to share and like and subscribe if you're so inclined. And otherwise, please stay tuned. Neil,
Yep. See you next time. Thanks.
thank you.